I'm back, my brothers of MGTOW, and in today's video, I will be continuing the part 2 of the part 1 of early years. I'm gonna fast forward a bit to a more relevant topic in the timeline when my mother started working at a little fast food joint called Church's Chicken. When she was working at Church's Chicken, she had become the manager over there. Only, my dad was working late at night, and my mother wouldn't be back till the evening times. So we were put in a little program. I forget what the name of it is. But anyways, my dad working late at night and my mom not getting back till the evening, well, found out that since my dad wouldn't be around and us kids wouldn't be around, that gave my mother every opportunity to mess around. And there was a lot of messing around when she worked at Church's Chicken. She met a dude at Church's Chicken who she abandoned us kids alone. Excuse me, no, it wasn't us kids alone. She left my sister home alone, sick, so she could go mess around with this individual. Now, if that doesn't cross your mind as, what the fuck is wrong with that woman, then I have no problem with shooting you in the head, because leaving a child alone at a young age, my sister was in the second grade. In the second grade, when my mother left her alone at home sick. If that doesn't make your skin boil, I don't know what will. Now, my dad should have dumped her, but she dumped him. And my parents were separated for a temporary amount of time, up until my father's car accident. My father, lucky to be alive, according to his story, because my dad has been known to exaggerate stuff or twist things to make it sound better than it actually is. But anyways, after my dad's accident, they sort of just blended back together again. With them back together, my mom kept doing the same stuff over and over again. Up until the point where my dad slowly started turning more and more into a dick. When I was younger, my dad was kinda mean, but not to this degree. You see, whenever certain things were brought to my attention, I was made aware of at a really young age. About 7, 8 years old, maybe 9. When these things were brought to my attention, I had no filter. I didn't know how to shut my mouth. And it ended up screwing things up in the end. But my dad should have known better. With a woman like this, and his kid knows it, something's up if a freaking 7, 8-year-old kid can understand what is going on. But my dad white knighted after her. You know, the funny thing is, when that stuff was going on and my parents were separated, my dad told me to give my mother a hard time about her being a slut, being the whore that she is. He told me to give her a hard time about that. But really what he was doing was trying to make me out to look like a needy child who needs a father figure in his life. So it was left no choice but my mother to bring my dad back into the relationship. You know, it's kind of funny how that thing works, how the women kick the men out of their homes. Their homes? man, that stuff like that just boggles my mind. How can that go through? I don't understand this. And I shouldn't, because the system's corrupt. And it makes no sense to begin with. That's like reading a story, and then you get to the end and the villain wins. And you're like, wait, how did the villain win? There was no explanation. There was nothing to make that villain win. What the hell is going on? This makes no sense. That is exactly what is going on. Anyways, my dad, being brought back into the picture, became more of a dick. Mainly because I think he was trying to fearmonger my mother to make her want to stay in the relationship. To make her think, oh, my dad will go and do something if she doesn't stay. Which I know for a fact would not happen, because my dad no longer has the balls that he used to after he went to jail the first time. A lot of these people, like my dad, bullies, if you will, I guess would be the best term to use for him, a bully. Just a baby, a little simp on the inside. As I've gone on about it in the previous video, on the one and now in this one, I'll move on from my dad being a simp and go on to my mother. When she was working at Church's Chicken and they were back in the relationship, the individual who she left my sister alone and went to go mess around with, she didn't come home for 3 days. And my dad was very, very upset, of course. Then, all of a sudden, this guy wants to take us kids fishing. Oh, and my dad did not have any of that. Of course, my dad had no choice since he was still injured from his car accident, and my mother went and took them, and she left me behind. You know, that's funny. That's a huge heaping ball of foreshadowing to come. If you've heard my story before, then you know what I'm talking about. One of my subscribers, Zombleed, knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say foreshadowing. Anyways, my dad was so pissed that another man was taking his kids fishing, he started going on and on, nobody's taking my kids fishing but me. Well, Dad, you've never taken us fishing, ever. We hardly ever did anything together after those events. We haven't done anything that us kids would like to do since we were kids. Little kids. So, him being upset that another man is taking them fishing and only he can take them fishing is a bit hypocritical when you think about it. I can only remember one time that my dad and I went fishing, and it wasn't really so much fishing. He went over to the river and told me to stay in the car, and he was outside for a few minutes with the fishing pole. Didn't catch anything and came back. I'm off topic. Anyways, when they went fishing, guess what? They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. And my mother ended up terminating that relationship with that dude because that dude made her pay. That dude made her pay for dates, for those events they went to, etc., etc. He made her pay the way, which is a bit hilarious, but I still don't want anything to do with him. I don't have anything to do with him in general, but at that time I didn't want anything to do with him. Then my mother started doing other things, some more shady things. Sleeping with illegals. Yes, illegals from Mexico. They'd come in, and they came in. Pun intended, they came in. And you know, sometimes I gotta wonder why my dad would stay with her when a woman who's having some illegal Mexican dick up inside of her. You want a woman that has a bunch of other men's dicks inside of her? If all the dicks that have been inside of her protruded from her skin, she'd be a freaking porcupine. A freaking porcupine. Oh, but my dad still loved her, and he still simped after her. Until my mother started smoking cigarettes, and my dad did not have that shit. She wanted to smoke them in the house. No, my dad didn't have that shit. You know, it's a bit hypocritical again of my dad being against her doing tobacco whenever he dipped the snuff all the time. But that's another story for another time. Anyways, when my mother started smoking cigarettes, she'd run out of money and she'd take it from us kids' piggy banks so she could buy more cigarettes. And when she took all of our money and she had no money to buy cigarettes for herself, she made the horrible decision of asking my father for money for cigarettes. Well, there's a jar of pennies that we keep on top of the refrigerator, and when my dad came home and put his keys up on the magnet on the refrigerator, my mother asked him, oh man, my dad got pissed. He flipped over the refrigerator, and that jar of pennies came crashing down and broke all over the floor, and the pennies scattered everywhere, and then he said, there's your fucking money for cigarettes. You know, in moments like that, there's certain moments that shine within my dad's little simp mangina-ness that are like, I like that. That was hilarious. After the whole cigarette incident, my mother moved on to alcohol. She started pouring down wine coolers, just cranking them down her gullet, and drinking wine cooler after wine cooler, getting so drunk she puked and almost fell. And that's the one thing I got to applaud my dad for when it came to alcohol, is he never drank around us kids. He said he didn't like alcohol, and if he ever drank alcohol, I never knew about it. I've never seen my dad touch beer or any other alcoholic beverage in my life. But my mother was not the same. You know, in that instance, I gotta say, my dad was a good father about that. And to some degree, my dad was a good father every once in a while. Other times, not so much. And the thing I'm gonna rant about right now about my father and my mother, that they both got wrong, is they didn't teach me jack shit about the world. I had to teach myself this last year of high school. I had to teach myself. I had to teach myself how to do mechanics. I had to teach myself how to budget. I had to teach myself how to make wise spendings, how to save, how to get a job, how to write a resume, how to do all that stuff. Everything that you can imagine underneath the sun. My parents didn't teach me anything of it. The only thing my dad and my mother taught me was respect and manners around people. And, you know, to some degree, yeah, I think that I did have a lot of respect and manners around a good amount of people. And then other times I was a little brat. I was a little brat to my aunt. I was a little brat to my uncle. And then when I reflect back on those times when I was younger, I just feel so ashamed of myself for being such a dickhead. And I'm not going to blame my parents for that. That's something I should have known better about. But anyways, I've gotten way off topic, and let me continue on. With the alcohol, it had gotten to the point where my mother thought more about when her next wine cooler was than when us kids needed help. When us kids needed a parent. We needed a mother figure. And that is the thing I'm going to point out right now about divorce courts and all that, who take children away from their fathers and give them to their mothers. You realize that that is child abuse when you separate the time and the parents like that. A child needs both their mother and their father to properly develop. And if they don't get that, that is child abuse. I don't give a shit what you say. A child needs both of their parents. And unfortunately, I didn't have much of any. But for the most part, my mother was the one who was the most absent. My dad was there. And when I mean there, I mean, he was there for me as a father, but only sometimes. He knew how to lecture me, he knew how to spank me, but he didn't really know how to teach me. Other than the Bible, manners, and a few moral life lessons here and there. That was it. In fact, my mother puts herself on this pedestal. It's like, oh, I'm such a good Christian. Jesus, Jesus. But she is a type of person who uses religion to manipulate. She doesn't treat religion as a good thing. She treats it as a tool used to manipulate. In fact, if I can remember clearly, which I forgot to add in my first part 1 video, when it came to Christianity, my dad taught me all the good things about it. He read the Bible to me. He told me stories from the Bible. He'd play with me about the Bible, like give me little pop quizzes and all that here and there. But my mother never teach me anything. The only thing she ever did was, oh, Jesus loves you. Jesus doesn't want you to do that. Jesus loves you, and he doesn't want you to do that kind of stuff. You need a better kid. You need to be a better adolescent child for your mother. And this gets really worse later on. Later on, my mother's tool of manipulation gets very, very bad. And for my father, it blinds him. Because my mother is not a good Christian, and my father is not a proper Christian. There are certain things my dad gets right on the nail, and other things he just is a complete hypocrite about. At this time, this is where my dad started looking to faith and saying like, oh, whenever this bad stuff happens, it's just God testing my will. It's not my wife's fault. It's not the devil's fault. It's not God's fault. It's just God testing me. It's just God testing me. And I can clearly remember God doesn't do that kind of stuff to his people. And that's going to be the end of it for part 2. Be on the lookout for part 3, in which I'm going to fast forward to my junior high years. Also, be aware that I'm not giving a very in-depth explanation with this early years mini-series. Instead, this is like me going down a timeline, pointing out key points that I can remember. And I'm going to go back and do big videos over certain events. I'm going to give more in-depth explanations of these events. And I'm also going to do takeaway videos, to little piece-by-piece videos where I point out certain things. And maybe I'll do some research along the way, some research videos and all that. But anyways, that's the end of it for now. And until later, be sure to get yourself some Haterade.